Anna Keller signed the trail register at Avalanche Lake in Glacier National Park at 8:52 on the morning of May 16th, 2019. Her handwriting was measured and clear, the pen pausing only briefly between words as she noted her intended route and estimated return. A 27-year-old sixth-grade science teacher from Helena, Montana, Anna was an experienced day hiker with over 20 documented wilderness excursions in the previous 3 years. According to the ranger logbook, she presented her annual parks pass at the entrance station that morning at 8:31, exchanged brief pleasantries about the weather, and mentioned her plans to complete the Avalanche Lake circuit before sunset. The morning air measured 46 degrees Fahrenheit, with scattered clouds moving slowly eastward over the jagged mountain ridgelines. Weather Service data confirmed stable conditions forecast throughout the day, with a slight chance of late afternoon precipitation. Trail conditions had been assessed as moderate difficulty due to recent snow melt, creating some slick passages near higher elevations, but nothing beyond the capabilities of someone with Anna's experience level. She called me the night before, her mother, Eleanor Keller, later told investigators. We discussed summer break plans. She mentioned wanting to hike before the weekend crowds. Nothing seemed unusual about her mood or preparations. The video call lasted 23 minutes, ending with a promise to share photos of the lake vista. Evidence recovered from her apartment indicated methodical preparation. A printed trail map with highlighted route, a full charge on her Garmin eTrex GPS unit, spare batteries, a survival whistle, and a compact first aid kit. Her day pack contained thermal layers, rain protection, 16 ounces of water, energy bars, and trail mix. Standard provisions for a 6-hour excursion. The preparation level made her statistical disappearance highly abnormal, noted Search and Rescue Coordinator Lieutenant Michael Randall. This wasn't someone who wandered off unprepared. Surveillance footage captured Anna purchasing a chocolate bar and water bottle at the visitor center store at 8:47, briefly consulting the large topographical map in the lobby, and exiting toward the trailhead. The timestamp aligned with her trail register entry 5 minutes later. 2 other hikers, retired couple Harold and Diane Markham from Oregon, recalled seeing Anna near the trailhead. She seemed completely at ease, Diane later told rangers. She checked something on her phone, adjusted her pack, and headed out. Just another nice day on the trails. The store receipt, later recovered from Anna's jacket pocket, became the first piece of physical evidence in her case file. The timestamp, printed in faded thermal ink, placed her within the visitor center complex less than 15 minutes before she disappeared into the wilderness. Her name, written in blue ink in the trail register, remained legible even after 3 days of spring rain. By early afternoon on May 16th, Anna had reached the mid-ridge overlook between mile markers 3 and 4 of the Avalanche Lake Trail. The forest canopy opened briefly at this elevation, offering spectacular views of the valley below. Weather station data recorded the temperature at 53 degrees with light variable winds. The crunch of thawed gravel under hiking boots, the distant pulse of a helicopter engaged in routine patrol exercises, and the warm scent of pine needles releasing their resin into the afternoon air created a sensory backdrop that dozens of hikers would later describe as perfectly ordinary. At approximately 2:15, Anna encountered Marcus and Jennifer Reed, siblings from Seattle, on a week-long hiking trip through Glacier. Their interaction, documented in subsequent National Park Service witness records filed May 22nd, provided the last verified human contact with Anna Keller. She asked if we would take her photo with the valley in the background, Marcus Reed testified. She seemed happy, mentioned something about the light being perfect. We chatted maybe 2 minutes about trail conditions ahead. She thanked us for the picture and continued uphill while we headed back down. The photograph, later recovered from Anna's cloud storage account, showed her smiling against a backdrop of snow-capped peaks, one hand casually adjusting her hat, the shadow of the photographer visible at the frame's edge. Metadata embedded in the image confirmed the location and timestamp, 2:17 p.m. Avalanche Trail Overlook. The weather seemed stable when we left her, Jennifer Reed added. But mountain systems can change quickly. By the time we reached the trailhead again around 4, clouds had moved in and temperature had dropped noticeably. National Weather Service data confirmed her observation. Between 3 and 5 p.m., a rapidly developing low-pressure system moved into the park, bringing dropping temperatures, increasing winds, and heavy cloud cover. By 6:30, visibility had deteriorated to less than 30 feet in many areas above 4,000 feet elevation, with sporadic rain beginning shortly thereafter. Park records show 11 other hikers signed out at the trail register between 4 and 7 that evening. Anna Keller was not among them. That's when normal recreation converted into anomaly, noted Ranger Thomas Wilkins, who was manning the visitor center that evening. When darkness falls and a solo hiker hasn't returned, our concern level escalates systematically. Protocol dictated waiting until morning before initiating formal search procedures for adult hikers without known medical conditions. A note was placed in the overnight log. Possible overdue hiker, avalanche trail, adult female, to be verified at 0600 hours. The weather continued deteriorating throughout the night. Rain became steady by 9 p.m., with wind gusts approaching 30 miles per hour at higher elevations. Temperature dropped to 38 degrees. No one yet knew that the search call initiated next dawn would become one of the most extensive in Glacier National Park's recent history. At 6:35 on the morning of May 17th, Ranger Eliza Montero noted Anna Keller's vehicle still parked in the Avalanche Trailhead lot. A quick check of overnight registrations confirmed no camping permits had been issued to Keller. At 7:45, after verifying Anna had not signed out the previous evening, Ranger Montero filed the initial missing hiker report. At 8:23, a final cell phone ping from Anna's device registered briefly near Snyder Creek Basin, approximately 4 miles from the trailhead and half a mile off the main trail. The signal was weak and transmitted no data beyond basic location information. Attempts to call the number went directly to voicemail. No further electronic signals were detected from the device. No audible distress calls. Last data burst contained no SOS, Lieutenant Randall observed in his preliminary assessment. The signal was consistent with a phone operating on minimal battery or in an area of poor reception. By 9:30, Catherine Keller, Anna's older sister, had been notified at her home in Spokane, Washington. Phone records show the call lasted 6 minutes and 17 seconds. They asked routine questions, medical conditions, medications, mental health history, Catherine later recounted to investigators. I remember thinking it was all so procedural while I was trying to process that my sister was actually missing in the wilderness. Catherine began the 4-hour drive to Glacier National Park immediately after the call, her GPS navigation system logging her departure time as 9:52 a.m. At 1200 hours, with no sign of the missing hiker and deteriorating weather conditions persisting across the search area, Lieutenant Randall formally activated Protocol Alpha, hiker overdue, the first search teams were deployed by 12:30, focusing on the main trail and immediate vicinity. Weather conditions had improved slightly from the previous night, but visibility remained limited at higher elevations due to low cloud cover and intermittent drizzle. Temperature held steady at 42 degrees with humidity at 87%. Initial search patterns followed standard procedure. Teams of 2 rangers moving outward from the last known location, calling Anna's name at regular intervals, listening for responses and scanning for visual indicators like disturbed vegetation or discarded items. The first 12 hours are where hope traditionally remains viable, noted search and rescue specialist Dr. Amanda Hayes in her subsequent case analysis. After that threshold, environmental factors, potential injuries, and psychological disorientation begin to significantly impact survival statistics. By sunset on May 17th, 8 search personnel had covered approximately 40% of the primary search grid without discovering any signs of Anna Keller. Catherine arrived at the visitor center at 2:25 p.m., joining the growing group of family members and park staff assembled in the conference room, hastily converted to search headquarters. Maps covered the walls, marked with colored pins indicating areas already searched and those still pending. As night fell again over Glacier National Park, the trail register that Anna had signed so casually the previous morning was carefully removed from its weatherproof container and placed into an evidence bag. Its status had evolved from administrative record to artifact, the last tangible proof of Anna Keller's presence on the mountain. Dawn on May 18 brought clearing skies, but temperatures that had dropped to 36 degrees overnight. Condensation clung to tent fabric at the hastily established base camp near the Avalanche Lake trailhead. By 7 a.m., Lieutenant Randall had expanded the operation to include 62 ground personnel divided into grid-assigned teams, 2 aerial units, 1 fixed-wing spotter aircraft and 1 search helicopter, and 3 canine handler teams with specialized wilderness tracking dogs. Day 2 requires exponential expansion of resources, Randall noted in his morning briefing, his voice captured on Ranger body camera footage. Our search radius now extends 3 miles in all directions from the last known cellular ping location. The comprehensive search grid, designated Operation Atlas in official communications, divided the wilderness into 36 quadrants of approximately 1 square mile each. Teams received assignments based on terrain difficulty, moving methodically through dense cedar undergrowth, where visibility often extended no more than 20 feet. At 10:43 a.m., Canine Unit 3 reported a potential alert near Junction B9, approximately 2 miles northeast of Anna's last known location. The dog, a 4-year-old German Shepherd named Ranger, exhibited behavior consistent with detecting human scent. Search Log 03, filed by handler Patricia Morris, documented the moment. Subject alert at coordinates 48 degrees, 48 minutes north, 113 degrees, 49 minutes west. Canine exhibited increased interest, moving in circular pattern with elevated tail posture. A 6-person team converged on the location within 30 minutes. The alert ultimately proved to be a false positive, likely triggered by another hiker's abandoned water bottle discovered beneath fallen branches. By midday, acoustic challenges became increasingly apparent. The rushing sound from Avalanche Creek, swollen with spring snowmelt, created a constant audio interference that made voice calls difficult to hear beyond 20 yards. Radio communications suffered similar limitations in the steep-walled valleys, with teams frequently moving to higher ground to maintain contact with base operations. Catherine Keller remained at the command post, joining Eleanor, who had arrived at 8:12 that morning after driving through the night from Helena. Park psychological support staff noted both women alternated between periods of intense focus on maps and search reports and longer stretches of silent withdrawal. You could see the frustration building in the searchers' faces by late afternoon, Catherine later told investigators. They'd returned to base with mud over their boots up to their knees, exhausted, and have nothing to report. The same question kept hanging in the air, though. No one would say it out loud. How does someone just vanish? Body camera footage from Ranger Wilson's afternoon patrol captured the physical toll of the search effort. Teams struggling through thick underbrush, calling Anna's name at regular intervals, the sound almost immediately swallowed by the forest. Radio static punctuated brief communications between teams, coordinates exchanged. Negative contact reported with mechanical regularity. At 4:27 p.m., the helicopter team requested refueling after 5 hours of continuous aerial surveillance. Their logs reported 0 visual anomalies across 17 search quadrants. While thermal imaging had limited effectiveness, during daylight hours, the pilots reported they would return at dusk for specialized night vision operations. Lieutenant Randall's evening summary was clinical, but carried undertones of growing concern. Each coordinate we clear widens the emotional perimeter. We're now considering scenarios beyond a simple hiking mishap. As darkness fell on the second full day of searching, standard protocol dictated a shift from rescue to recovery probability matrices. This transition was not shared with the family. Base camp logs recorded a simple entry at 2100 hours. Negative contact by dusk. Status remains open. By the morning of May 19th, the search operation had transformed the normally tranquil area around Lake McDonald Lodge into an improvised command center. 4 large canvas tents housed communications equipment, map stations, and rest areas for rotating search teams. The smell of propane stoves mingled with the damp air as volunteers and professionals alike prepared for the day's operations. Eleanor and Catherine Keller had been assigned a small room in the lodge through arrangement with park administration. Volunteer coordinator Megan Ruiz, a 10-year veteran of mountain rescue operations, served as their primary liaison to the search teams. The family dynamic in these situations follows predictable patterns, noted Chaplain Robert Simmons in his Park Psychological Services report filed that evening. Subject exhibits alternating resignation and anticipatory denial. They prepare for the worst while constructing increasingly unlikely scenarios in which their loved one remains alive and well. Morning briefings began at 5:30 with maps spread across folding tables as team leaders received their assignments. The constant drone of helicopter rotors provided a soundtrack to the day's activities, punctuated by radio calls and the voices of new volunteers receiving hasty training in search protocols. We had 37 civilian volunteers by day 3, Megan Ruiz recalled. People from surrounding communities, fellow teachers from Anna's school, even a few of her students' parents. The response was extraordinary, but managing untrained searchers creates its own challenges. Each volunteer received a 15-minute orientation, a laminated map with their assigned grid section clearly marked, and explicit instructions to report any potential evidence without disturbing it. They were paired with experienced personnel and restricted to less hazardous terrain. Throughout the day, Eleanor Keller maintained a quiet presence at the edge of the operations tent, watching as teams reported in and new assignments were distributed. Catherine alternated between sitting with her mother and walking the perimeter of the base camp, stopping occasionally to study the topographical maps posted on exterior bulletin boards. Families translate procedural language into personal time, observed Dr. Amanda Hayes. Every hour becomes a missing heartbeat. Every search grid represents a space where their loved one might be suffering. The psychological burden is immense. By mid-afternoon, the weather had deteriorated again. Rain fell in steady sheets, forcing the aerial units to temporarily suspend operations. Ground teams continued their methodical sweeps, but reported significantly reduced visibility and increasingly hazardous footing on steep terrain. At 1600 hours, a team of college students volunteering from Montana State University returned from their assigned sector visibly exhausted, their orange vests darkened by rain. One young woman quietly approached Catherine Keller and awkwardly offered her a coffee from the supply tent. I didn't know what to say to her, the student, Emma Parker, later told her group leader. We searched for hours and found nothing. It felt like we were failing her personally. As evening approached, the operational maps showed approximately 60% of the primary search area had been covered, with more remote sections scheduled for specialized teams the following day. Canine handlers reported diminishing effectiveness as the continuous rain washed away scent trails. The evening briefing was shorter than previous days. The assembled searchers quieter, as Lieutenant Randall outlined the next day's objectives. Several volunteers who had taken time off work announced they would need to return to their jobs. By day 4, volunteer numbers thinned. Faith persisted out of inertia, not logic. One ranger noted in his personal log. We continued because that's what we do, not because statistics gave us reason for optimism. That night, paper maps curled under the damp air in the command tent as a skeleton crew maintained operations through the darkness. The Kellers returned to their room at the lodge, the door closing on another day without answers. A breakthrough appeared to come shortly after noon on May 21st, the 5th day of search operations. A ground team working the northeastern quadrant discovered a blue knit hat caught on a fallen branch, approximately 30 yards from the established trail, near the edge of a steep ravine descending toward a tributary of Avalanche Creek. The discovery site, logged as Evidence Point Alpha in official reports, was approximately 1.5 miles from Anna's last confirmed location. The hat matched the description and photographs of the one Anna had been wearing when last seen. We've got a potential article of clothing, blue knit hat consistent with subject description, Ranger Thomas Wilson reported over the radio, his voice rising slightly despite training in emotional regulation. Location is grid E7, coordinates 48 degrees, 49 minutes north, 113 degrees 46 minutes west. Protocol required treating the discovery as potential evidence. The hat remained untouched while photographs were taken from multiple angles. The plastic evidence bag rustled amid the steady rainfall as the item was carefully preserved for analysis. Within 30 minutes, the discovery prompted a significant reallocation of search resources, with 8 teams converging on the surrounding area and the helicopter diverted to perform tight grid aerial surveillance of the ravine. When notified of the discovery, Eleanor Keller broke her stoic composure for the first time in days. Witness statements describe her grabbing Catherine's arm, whispering, "They found something," repeatedly, while search coordinators attempted to temper expectations. Possible evidence doesn't necessarily mean proximity to the subject, Lieutenant Randall cautioned in his briefing to the family. We're intensifying the search in that area, but we need to wait for confirmation. The hat was transported to a field laboratory established in the ranger station. Preliminary examination revealed fibers consistent with wool acrylic blend commonly found in outdoor gear. No immediately visible biological materials were detected. The item was packaged for expedited transport to the State Crime Laboratory for DNA analysis. For the remainder of the day, search operations focused intensively around the discovery site. Teams methodically moved outward in concentric circles, examining every depression in the ground, every collection of branches that might conceal a fallen hiker. The sound of search personnel calling Anna's name echoed continuously through the ravine, competing with the rush of water from the creek below. By nightfall, no additional evidence had been discovered. The expanded search of the area continued through dusk using specialized lighting equipment, but yielded no further clues. 2 days later, preliminary DNA analysis results were delivered to the command center via secure law enforcement channels. Investigators' memo number 43, filed by Lieutenant Randall, stated simply, "Probability of unrelated debris, high. DNA results exclude match to subject." The blue hat, it appeared, had belonged to another hiker entirely and had no connection to Anna Keller. The timestamp on the laboratory report read 1622, May 23rd. False findings carry emotional cost, equivalent to recovery, noted Dr. Hayes in her subsequent analysis. The family experienced the emotional whiplash of apparent breakthrough, followed by crushing disappointment. From a psychological perspective, this pattern of hope and loss can be more damaging than sustained uncertainty. When informed that the hat was not Anna's, Eleanor Keller nodded once and returned to her chair by the window of the command tent. Catherine stepped outside, standing motionless in the light rain for several minutes before rejoining the operations briefing. The search maps were revised. Evidence Point Alpha was marked with a simple notation: data inconclusive. Hope recalibrated. As traditional search methods yielded no results by the evening of May 23rd, Lieutenant Randall authorized deployment of specialized thermal imaging equipment for night operations. 2 technicians from the Montana State Emergency Services arrived at 1700 hours with a truck containing forward-looking infrared FLIR, scanning systems designed to detect heat signatures in wilderness environments. Even after 7 days, there's still a possibility of detecting a living subject, explained Senior Technician Andrea Vasquez during the pre-deployment briefing. The system can identify temperature differentials as small as 2 degrees Fahrenheit against ambient background. The primary FLIR unit was mounted on the search helicopter, with a secondary handheld system assigned to ground teams operating along the ridge lines where aerial observation was limited by dense tree cover. Weather conditions had finally improved, with clear skies and temperatures dropping to 41 degrees, ideal conditions for thermal contrast detection. Operations began at 2100 hours, with the helicopter making systematic sweeps at 300 feet above the primary search area. Inside the aircraft, Technician Vasquez monitored a screen displaying real-time thermal data. The wilderness below transformed into a ghostly landscape of blue-black terrain with occasional bright spots representing heat sources. Most heat signatures are easily classified, Vasquez noted in her technical log. Rocks retaining day heat appear as diffuse glows. Small animals present as concentrated mobile points. Human subjects would display distinctive torso and limb patterns. At 23:14, the system registered an anomalous heat signature on the North Ridge, approximately 2 miles from the trail. The helicopter diverted to investigate, hovering as the camera system zoomed to maximum resolution. After 3 minutes of observation, the team classified the signature as elk movement. A small herd bedded down among fallen trees, their body heat creating a cluster of bright spots on the thermal display. Throughout the night, ground teams equipped with the handheld unit methodically covered steep terrain unsuitable for aerial surveillance. The forest at night created its own soundscape. The whisper of wind through pine branches, the occasional call of nocturnal birds, and the labored breathing of tired searchers pushing beyond normal endurance. Team fatigue was becoming a serious safety concern, noted Safety Officer Rebecca Chen in her midnight assessment. After 8 days of continuous operations, even experienced personnel were showing signs of exhaustion and decreased decision-making capacity. Radio communications captured the deterioration of team cohesion. Abbreviated responses, truncated words, and increasing periods of silence between check-ins. Even the standard call and response protocol, searchers calling Anna's name, then pausing to listen, had become mechanical. The voices flat and expectation of response clearly diminished. At 0200 hours, Lieutenant Randall sat alone in the command tent typing the day's operational summary into the incident management system. The report, later obtained through Freedom of Information requests, contained a section rarely included in official documentation. Probability assessment. Based on terrain, weather exposure, time elapsed, and absence of responsive signals, subject survival likelihood now classified as minimal. Transition from rescue to recovery phase recommended for operational planning purposes. The report was not shared with the Keller family. By dawn on May 24th, weather conditions had deteriorated rapidly. The National Weather Service issued a severe thunderstorm warning for Glacier National Park, with lightning risk deemed significant for elevated terrain. At 0730, Lieutenant Randall made the difficult decision to temporarily suspend search operations. The wilderness offers mimicry. Everything looks human until proven otherwise, Vasquez observed as the FLIR equipment was packed for transport. Sometimes technology only confirms how easily the natural world can absorb a human presence without leaving traces. The official log entry was clinical. Search suspended temporarily due to lightning risk. File remains open. On September 2nd, 2023, more than 4 years after Anna Keller's disappearance, seasonal trail maintenance contractor Wesley Hammond and his 3-person crew were clearing overgrown vegetation near an old service cabin, approximately 4 miles northeast of Avalanche Lake. The cabin, designated Maintenance Outpost 7 in park records, had been decommissioned a decade earlier but was occasionally used for equipment storage during remote projects. We were cutting back brush that had grown over the access path, Hammond stated in Incident Report 94BQ. Denton noticed something reflective in the soil about 20 yards east of the cabin. Crew member James Denton, 31, had spotted what appeared to be a fragment of nylon strap partially exposed in an area of disturbed soil. The material was weathered but retained the distinctive purple-gray coloration common in high-end hiking gear. Something about it didn't seem right, Denton recalled. The ground around it looked different. Not natural erosion, more like it had been dug up and refilled. Hammond instructed his crew to stop work immediately and called Park Dispatch at 1417. Ranger Eliza Montero, who had been involved in the original Keller search 4 years earlier, responded to the scene, arriving at 1545. The afternoon light filtered through golden grass surrounding the cabin site. A cold wind swept across the small clearing, carrying the metallic echo of the crew's tools, resting against the cabin wall. Ranger Montero photographed the area before carefully exposing more of the material, revealing what appeared to be a torn backpack strap, consistent with the equipment Anna Keller had been carrying. Possible historical evidence linked to Missing Persons Case 2019, Montero noted in her preliminary assessment. Area secured for forensic evaluation. By nightfall, a two-person evidence team had arrived from park headquarters. Under portable lights powered by a generator, they established a preliminary grid around the discovery site. The rhythmic chirr of insects competed with the mechanical hum as specialists carefully removed surface vegetation in a 3-foot radius around the exposed material. The forest retains what humans misfile, observed forensic specialist Greta Hoffman as she collected soil samples from multiple depths. Even after years, disturbances in natural deposition patterns remain detectable to trained observers. By the following morning, September 3rd, the investigation had expanded significantly. The discovery of a fragment potentially linked to the high-profile Keller disappearance triggered an escalated response. 3 additional forensic technicians arrived by helicopter, along with Assistant Chief Ranger Robert Kincaid, who had supervised the original search operation. Working methodically outward from the initial discovery point, the team identified an area approximately 15 feet by 12 feet, where the soil composition and vegetation patterns differed subtly from the surrounding terrain. Ground-penetrating radar was brought in to survey the area non-invasively, revealing irregular density patterns consistent with previous excavation. At 15:20 hours, the team uncovered a second item and then a plastic water bottle cap matching the brand purchased by Anna Keller at the visitor center on her last recorded day in the park. The item was carefully bagged and labeled, its position documented precisely in 3-dimensional space relative to the initial discovery. The items themselves may seem minor, Kincaid noted in his field assessment, but their presence 4 miles from the search area, in proximity to a seldom used park structure, raises significant questions about both the circumstances of disappearance and the adequacy of our original search parameters. By sunset on September the 3rd, the investigation had shifted from discovery to active excavation under the supervision of both Park Service forensic personnel and a FBI evidence recovery team summoned from the Helena field office. The evidence transport initiated that evening carried not only physical items but the weight of renewed investigation into a case that had never been officially closed, yet had receded from active pursuit as years passed without development. By dawn on September 4th, 2023, the area surrounding the old service cabin had been transformed into a methodical excavation zone. White canopies protected the site from both elements and aerial observation, while evidence technicians in Tyvek suits worked in a careful grid pattern expanding eastward from the cabin. At 11:17 that morning, the team uncovered what senior evidence technician Michael Reeves described in his report as a shallow pit, approximately 76 inches in length, 30 inches in width, and 40 inches deep, located 54 feet east of the cabin's rear wall. Within this depression, investigators discovered remnants of a blue tarp, partially decomposed due to 4 years of environmental exposure. Beneath the tarp fragments, soil samples revealed trace evidence that would later prove critical to the investigation. We identified biological material consistent with human decomposition, stated FBI forensic anthropologist Dr. Elaine Winters in her preliminary field assessment. The limited preservation suggested a body had been present but was subsequently moved. By late afternoon, the excavation had yielded additional evidence: a torn fragment of a hiking boot matching the brand Anna Keller had been wearing, a plastic hair clip containing several strands of brown hair, and most significantly, soil samples containing DNA profiles from two separate individuals. The discovery of multiple DNA sources immediately transformed our understanding of the case, noted Special Agent Thomas Keene, who arrived from the FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit that evening. This was no longer a potential accident site, but a crime scene with indications of human intervention. Laboratory analysis conducted over the following 72 hours confirmed what investigators had begun to suspect. One DNA profile matched Anna Keller based on comparison with personal items recovered from her apartment. The second profile, partial and degraded, would take longer to identify, but eventually revealed connections that shifted the investigation dramatically. On September 7th, as excavation of the site continued under intensified security, the chirr of insects over generator hum provided a constant backdrop to the meticulous work. Temperatures had dropped noticeably, with the first hints of autumn bringing a sharp chill to the morning air. At 14:45, a particularly disturbing discovery prompted one junior ranger to step away from the site. Audio recording of the moment, later redacted from public releases, captured the sound of retching as waste bags containing human biological material were uncovered from a secondary location 10 yards from the primary excavation. From search to crime scene, the vocabulary shifts, not the terrain, observed Lieutenant Randall, who had returned to assist with the investigation. The same trees that witnessed our desperate calls for a missing hiker 4 years ago now watched us uncover evidence of something far more deliberate. By nightfall on September 8th, the accumulated evidence was sufficient for the National Park Service to request formal joint jurisdiction with federal law enforcement. Park Superintendent Margaret Coleman issued Authorization CR-17, establishing the multi-agency task force that would ultimately include personnel from the National Park Service, FBI, and Glacier County Sheriff's Department. The investigation's code designation appeared for the first time in official communications that evening: Glacier Predation File. Throughout the process, the Keller family had been notified of developments with careful attention to both information accuracy and psychological impact. Catherine Keller, now 35 and working as a healthcare administrator in Portland, Oregon, had been the primary family contact. Official records indicate she received 4 briefing calls between September 4th and 8th, each lasting between 12 and 27 minutes. When they first called about finding something at the cabin site, I felt this strange detachment, Catherine later told victim advocates. After 4 years, I'd constructed a reality where Anna had somehow just walked away from her life. The evidence made me confront the truth I'd been avoiding, that someone had taken her from us. The forensic reconstruction of Anna Keller's final weeks emerged slowly over the months following the discovery at the service cabin. Between September 2023 and March 2024, investigators pieced together a narrative far more disturbing than the initial missing hiker scenario. The breakthrough came in late October, when the partial DNA profile recovered from the site was matched to Maren Voss, a former seasonal maintenance worker who had been employed by Glacier National Park from April through September 2019. Voss's employment records showed she had been responsible for routine upkeep of remote facilities, including the decommissioned cabin near where Anna's remains were discovered. The personnel file terminated abruptly in late September 2019, noted Special Agent Keene. Voss simply failed to report for her final 2 weeks, forfeiting accumulated leave and final pay. No exit interview was conducted. A search warrant executed at Voss's last known address in Kalispell, Montana, revealed an abandoned apartment containing critical evidence, a journal documenting increasingly paranoid thoughts, numerous references to voices from the lake, and most significantly, entries describing encounters with hikers in Glacier National Park. May 17. She wouldn't stop asking questions, kept saying people were expecting her, brought her to the cabin to keep her quiet. The lake told me she knew too much. The journal entries, submitted as Court Exhibit 17A, documented a psychological breakdown that had apparently accelerated during Voss's isolation in remote park areas. References to the lake voices appeared with increasing frequency throughout the spring and summer of 2019. Perhaps most disturbing was the recovery of a small digital audio recorder hidden beneath floorboards in the apartment. The device contained 27 separate recordings, 3 of which captured interactions with Anna Keller. Forensic analysis of these recordings, conducted by FBI audio specialist Samantha Torres, revealed crucial details of Anna's captivity. Based on background noise patterns and sequential timestamps, we can establish that subject Keller was held at the cabin location for approximately 23 days. Initial recordings indicate active resistance and repeated attempts to reason with her captor. Later recordings show significant deterioration in vocal strength and cognitive function consistent with dehydration and malnutrition. As investigators expanded their search of park records, disturbing patterns emerged. 2 prior visitor disappearances, Heather Linton in 2014 and Marcus Chen in 2016, had occurred in similar areas of the park during periods when Voss was employed as seasonal staff. Neither case had been solved, and both had ultimately been classified as presumed wilderness accidents. The psychological profile indicates a predator who didn't begin with homicidal intent, explained Dr. Caroline Mercer, the forensic psychiatrist assigned to the case. Voss appears to have experienced progressive paranoid delusions that transformed normal encounters with hikers into perceived threats requiring intervention. The most haunting aspect of the case emerged through medical examiner Dr. James Patterson's analysis of trace evidence recovered from the cabin site. His report, submitted to the Joint Task Force on February 12, 2024, concluded, based on biological evidence patterns and journal documentation, captivity lasted approximately 3 weeks. Cause of death was most likely dehydration and exposure, not direct homicide by weapon. Evidence suggests the subject was initially provided minimal sustenance, which was later withheld, either deliberately or through captor negligence. One final piece of evidence proved particularly disturbing to investigators. The last entry on the digital recorder, dated June 9, 2019. The 28-second clip contained only ambient sounds of wind through trees, Anna's labored breathing, and then an abrupt silence. Predation in isolation blurs intent. Coercion becomes companionship measured in silence, observed Agent Keene in his final case summary. The recovered voice note ends mid-breath, wind, then static. On December 11, 2024, the United States District Court for Montana convened for the final day of proceedings in United States v. Maren Voss. The courtroom in Helena maintained the fluorescent quiet typical of federal proceedings, the soft hum of ventilation systems, the occasional rustle of papers, and the measured voices of legal professionals who had spent 14 weeks navigating one of the most disturbing cases in regional history. Maren Voss, 43, sat at the defense table in a gray institutional jumpsuit, her posture rigid, eyes fixed on the stack of sealed exhibits that documented her actions 5 years earlier. The federal indictment had charged her with 3 counts of unlawful confinement and 2 counts of negligent homicide related to the deaths of Anna Keller and, following additional investigation, Heather Linton in 2014. The environment itself participated in these crimes, testified forensic psychiatrist Dr. Mercer during the final expert witness presentation. Isolation in wilderness settings appears to have accelerated the defendant's paranoid delusions while simultaneously providing opportunities for predation that would have been impossible in more populated contexts. The prosecution's case had been built methodically around physical evidence recovered from the cabin site, DNA analysis confirming Anna's 3-week captivity, and the defendant's own recorded statements and journal entries. The defense strategy focused primarily on Voss's deteriorating mental state, arguing diminished capacity rather than contesting the basic facts of the crimes. Eleanor and Catherine Keller attended each day of the trial, seated in the front row of the gallery. Court records note that neither woman spoke publicly about the proceedings, though Catherine provided a written victim impact statement that was read into the record on December 4th. "My sister went hiking on a spring morning, trusting in the beauty and safety of our national parks," the statement read in part. "She encountered evil disguised as wilderness stewardship. No verdict can restore her to us, but truth, at least, honors her memory." After 7 hours of deliberation, the jury returned with their decision. Voss was found guilty on reduced counts of involuntary manslaughter and unlawful detention. The verdict reflected the jury's acceptance of mental illness as a mitigating factor, while still holding the defendant accountable for her actions. Judge Miranda Holbrook addressed the court before pronouncing sentence. "This case represents a tragic intersection of institutional oversight, mental health failure, and wilderness isolation. The defendant exploited her position within a system designed to protect both visitors and natural spaces." The sentence remained technically indeterminate, as Voss was remanded to federal psychiatric custody for comprehensive evaluation. Legal analysts noted that this outcome likely meant long-term confinement in a secure medical facility rather than standard prison housing. As the proceedings concluded, United States Attorney Daniel Morrison met briefly with the Keller family in a small conference room adjacent to the courtroom. No recordings exist of this conversation, but court officer Marjorie Wilkins later noted that the meeting lasted 27 minutes and ended with handshakes rather than emotional displays. "Justice rendered clinically, not cathartically," observed Morrison in his case summary filed with the Department of Justice. "The legal system processed a tragedy it could neither heal nor fully explain." The stack of sealed exhibits, containing journal pages, audio recordings, photographs of recovered evidence, and DNA analysis reports, was transferred to secure federal storage that afternoon. Each item was cataloged in the evidence management system with the case designation GNP KLR 1923. The systematic documentation of one woman's disappearance and another's descent into predatory delusion was thus reduced to archival notation, boxes of paper and recordings on climate-controlled shelves, accessible only through proper channels and authorized requests. The verdict, guilty on reduced counts. Sentence indeterminate due to mental evaluation. In January 2025, the National Park Service implemented a significant protocol revision directly resulting from the Keller case, Directive 463, informally known among rangers as the Keller Check, established mandatory ranger cross-verification of solo hiker sign-ins after 18 hours had elapsed without trail register checkout. The previous system relied heavily on self-reporting or companion notification, explained NPS Safety Director Gregory Martinez during the policy announcement. This new protocol creates a systematic safety net specifically for solo wilderness users. The directive required rangers to physically verify vehicles remaining in trailhead parking areas at the end of each day, cross-reference with trail registers, and initiate preliminary welfare checks for any solo hikers who had not returned by their estimated completion time. The policy represented a fundamental shift from reactive to proactive missing persons response. Implementation began with a 3-day training seminar for wilderness first responders and park rangers from across the national park system. Participants gathered in the main conference center at Glacier National Park headquarters, the rustle of paper manuals and quiet conversations filling the room as they reviewed case studies and response protocols. On the seminar's final day, Eleanor Keller addressed the assembled group. Her prepared remarks lasted exactly 7 minutes, delivered in a voice described by attendees as measured but unaffected. She shared brief anecdotes about Anna's love of wilderness spaces and her meticulous preparation for outdoor adventures. "My daughter did everything right," Eleanor concluded. "She signed the register, carried appropriate gear, stayed on established trails. The system failed her, not the other way around. This protocol means her experience now protects others." The audience response was muted applause followed by thoughtful silence. Several rangers approached Eleanor afterward, some simply shaking her hand, others sharing brief words about their involvement in the original search. "System learns through attrition," noted Ranger Thomas Wilson in his training evaluation, "but the human cost of that learning process is immeasurable." By spring 2025, all 63 national parks had implemented the new protocol. Internal records showed 17 potential missing persons cases identified and resolved within hours of activation during the first 6 months. 17 hikers who might otherwise have faced extended periods without assistance. The procedure now bears her name. On a clear autumn morning in November 2025, exactly 90 yards from the Avalanche Lake trailhead, a new trail register stands protected within a cedar kiosk. The first line of the logbook reads, "Anna Keller Memorial Hike," printed in official National Park Service typography. Each Wednesday, regardless of weather conditions, a ranger initials the bottom of each used page, not a requirement of official protocol, but a ritual maintained by the Glacier Ranger staff. Today, Ranger Eliza Montero performs this duty, her pen moving deliberately across paper as hikers prepare their gear nearby. The light slants through western red cedars at precisely the same angle it did 6 years earlier. The silence between bird calls remains identical. Nothing about this wilderness has changed, though everything about how humans move through it has been recalibrated. In the official archives, Anna Keller's case file bears the final designation: resolved, non-recoverable remains. But in this moment, as Ranger Montero closes the register and secures its weatherproof cover, one signature endures. The ink has faded into paper fibers over the years, yet it remains visible. Anna's handwriting on that May morning, proof of presence ending exactly where it began.